Dynamisation, jobs and opportunities, and that's why the people of New Zealand support our government. Thank you very much, sir.
Denise Roche.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'd like to rise to take this call for the Greens on the gambling harm reduction amendment bill. I'll start my speech by also acknowledging the death of Maureen Waka, who was on the board of Problem Gambling Foundation New Zealand and was a stalwart defender of Māori and a support for Māori with problem gambling problems. She worked tirelessly to raise this as an issue in Māori communities and to try to address the harm caused by gambling. This bill has come back to the House with its good intentions completely gutted, and it should be withdrawn by the member who has the bill in his name. And it's a real shame because the original intentions of the bill were sound, and they were to give councils and communities the power to cut the number of pokies in the area or eliminate them altogether, to ensure that at least 80% of the 37% of the funds which were distributed as grants from gambling machine losses be returned to the communities where the gambling took place, phase out the pokey trusts which distribute the gambling money from pokies and replace them with more accountable committees under the control of local authorities, remove horse racing from the list of charitable purposes that can be used, that can use the gambling funds, and introduce harm minimisation, player tracking and pre-commit cards, enabling gamblers to put controls on the amount of time they spend and money they lose while playing pokies. What does this bill do? None of that. Why? Because the pokey trusts won. There were over 35,000 submissions on this bill. The majority of them came from community organisations that are the recipients of the money from Class 4 gambling. That's the pokey gambling. Many of these organisations received letters from pokey trusts that had previously given them grants, encouraging them to put in submissions opposing the bill. One pokey trust, Pub Charity, went so far as to offer workshops to organisations who had received funding from them in the past, and I know this because I asked submitters while they were giving their submissions, and they were encouraged to write submissions to oppose the bill. These workshops also ensured that there was a lot of misinformation promulgated, and Ruth Dyson has already spoken about that. And it was simply so many non-truths that were told. It was a big beat up by the industry. And let's step back a minute and just remember what pokies are for and what pokey trusts are for. The Gambling Act says that the only reason pokies exist is to provide benefits through funding to the community. And it says that the money from pokies can only be used for authorised purposes, which are charitable purposes, non-commercial purposes that have community benefits, promoting, controlling and conducting race meetings. And the only reason that pokey trusts exist is to distribute that money. Now, I'm not sure what others think of this, but I think pokey trusts using that money that should go to communities to wrangle community groups together to get them to oppose the bill that will make them go out of existence is absolutely wrong. And we've also recently seen an example of Pub Charity, again, Martin Chair, the CEO, deciding to punish Canterbury Cathedral by denying them funding because one member of the Anglican Church made a submission supporting the Flavel Bill. And how did Martin Chair know? He knew because he was in the room when the submission was given. He really couldn't have missed the submitter saying that he did not represent the Anglican Church because some people in the Anglican Church were worried that if they submitted, they would not be able to access funding in the future. And lo and behold, that's exactly what's happened. So what we have here is a pokey trust that interferes in the democratic processes of the legislative system by using threats and rewards to get their own way. That's bullying. This bill was attempting to deal to the pokey trusts and the rorts they get up to. An example, and there are many from this year, is that the Department of Internal Affairs is currently investigating a $30 million investigation into the racing industry in the South Island. That's $30 million of community funding going to racing, and from 3 different trusts. This bill was an attempt to stop not just the rorts by Pokie Trust, but also the funneling of money from pokies that are concentrated in poor areas to other regions, and also the dodgy practice of funding the racing industry. And if we think back to the intent of the original Act to provide funds for charitable, non-commercial purposes with community benefits, I can't see that providing stake money for racehorse owners is a particularly charitable act, particularly when you consider that New Zealand Racing Board is already taking millions from racehorse betting anyway. Now, I note that the report from the Select Committee recommends including in the regulations the provisions for 80% of the funds generated being distributed back to the same area where the gambling took place, what it says in the bill. And it also recommends that the actual harm minimisation measures, the player tracking and the pre-commitment cards, they also go into the regulations. But what that means is that they will have to consult further with the industry about these issues. And as we've seen with this bill, the pokie industry has got ample money to organise opposition. And is it likely that the industry will agree to measures that reduce the amount of money being gambled? I don't think so. What the industry will do, and what they have done, is sidetrack the deal with less effective harm minimisation methods. A classic example is facial recognition technology as a harm minimisation tool, which was, put forward to the Select Committee, and I must say the Select Committee became rather enamoured with it. But the thing about facial recognition technology is that it's like a self-imposed ban. It kicks in after the gambler has developed a problem and has already lost a lot of money, after they've already been sucked dry. Player tracking, on the other hand, is a predictive model, and pre-commitment cards means every gambler has to decide before they start gambling how much they will spend. They are the ambulance at the top of the cliff. And perhaps one of the saddest aspects of this bill now is that it actually makes things worse. The Select Committee is recommending that there be a provision for the transfer of pokies from one area to another. There was nothing in the original bill about this. This will enable pokies to shift their machines from poor areas to where they are concentrated to other areas without losing any of their machines. This provision will cut across the ability for councils to use a transferal provision to reduce the number of pokies in their communities. And I asked specifically about this, whether councils could still require venues to drop some of their pokies as a condition for them being able to transfer, which was the policy of the last Auckland City Council. And I was told that they would not be able to do this with this provision in the Act. This is not giving communities a voice. This is not reducing harm. This is a win for the pokie trusts. This bill needs to be withdrawn. If it passes, we are likely to have a worse situation than we have already. It's a clear signal that this bill is dangerous when the agencies that deal with the fallout and pick up the pieces in the community from the harm caused by problem gambling, and I quote the Salvation Army and the Problem Gambling Foundation, when they are calling for this bill to be dropped, then there has to be some serious reasons for it. I've outlined a few of them. I'll outline more as we progress this bill through the House. I appeal to the member, Te Ururo Flavel, to heed those people and drop this bill. We'll be opposing it.
Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to take a call.